Josh, welcome to the program, sir. How are you?
Great to be back.
Thank you. We were just talking about this particular leaker. He's not a whistleblower, but I don't think he was trying to hurt the United States. I'm not talking about punishment or anything else. I'm just trying to figure him out. Do you have any insight on that? Any thoughts?
Right. I mean, listen, as someone who has been on the receiving end of leaks for 20 years, there's basically four motivations. One is that you're trying to vanquish your enemy. One is that you're trying to promote yourself. One is that you're doing it for giggles. And one of it is that you're doing it for money. And it seems, based on all the available evidence, that he was doing it for his ego, for giggles,
right.
That essentially he's a moron. Okay. And it's a sad story because he's 21 years old.
Correct.
And he threw his life away to be a big shot on a Discord server for a few months. And that's a personal tragedy for him and his family. But I think the point here is that because morons are likely to do moronic things, maybe we shouldn't give access to our top secret information to hundreds of thousands of people who inevitably some will be morons.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, and so you could blame the moron, sure, but you should also blame the system that let the moron access all
Correct.
That stuff.
Correct.
And, you know, all we hear from the administration is, oh, well, nothing went wrong. Well, nothing went wrong. Right? If nobody takes accountability, then nothing will get fixed. And you can't just say, that nobody made any mistakes, but that's exactly what this administration.
But how?
Well, everybody.
Then even if somebody didn't make a mistake, I mean, I know they put new traffic lights in all the time here in Texas. You'll be driving down the street and there's no traffic light, and all of a sudden there's a traffic light. Why? Because a lot of people started making mistakes and there were traffic accidents. So nobody made a mistake not putting a light in there in the first place. But once it's exposed as a problem, you change it and put a light in. Nobody did anything wrong. Well, how about the policies? Because it seems like if he was allowed to do this, he shouldn't be.
Right. And you could be sure that now the Massachusetts Air National Guard is going to get cut off from some of this stuff. But to be honest with you, Glenn, I've been, again, 20 years of dealing with this kind of information leakage. I'm here to tell you this happens all the time. You go into any office in the Pentagon, you go to any K Street lobbies, you'll find you go into Joe Biden's garage, you go into the Mar-a-Lago party storage room,
right.
You're going to find a lot of secrets just laying around. It's just true, okay? And I'm actually surprised this kind of thing doesn't happen every month because of how horribly the handling of this top secret information is done all over our government. Now, that's not to say that there isn't also a parallel problem here of overclassification, right?
Yes.
We're classifying way too much stuff. But then the stuff that's really important to classify, we're not keeping it a secret. So you can have two thoughts in your head. One is that we need to classify less stuff and then take the stuff that's really classified and protect it better. But we're doing neither of those things.
So I haven't really heard from anybody that doesn't have an axe to grind one way or another. Just talk about what he released.
Right.
Who did this really hurt? What did we really find out?
Right. So I put the disclosures into three buckets, Glenn. One is stuff we shouldn't know. One is stuff we should have known about, and one is stuff that we already knew about. I'll explain what I mean. Stuff we shouldn't know, right? When we're spying on top Russian leaders, when we have a mole at the top level of the government of our enemy, that should stay secret because once you blurt that out into the world, that guy gets killed, we lose our source, and our country's security suffers.
Let me make it very simple for everybody. The first rule here, stuff we shouldn't know, that's the knock list that Tom Cruise protected in Mission Impossible #1. Just saying.
Right.
All right.
Right. So that's bad. He should not have released that stuff. Then there's the stuff that we should have known about. This is what I reported on, Glenn, that China has tested a new hypersonic missile that can defeat our aircraft carriers and our missile defense. In other words, we spent 30 years building aircraft carriers and missile defense, and the Chinese built a missile for a 100,000th of the price that makes those things obsolete. That seems kind of important for people to know. Yeah. Why were we hiding that? That was in the documents. I brought that out. I think there's a lot of stuff in the documents that American people should know because it reveals that the world is changing fast and our government really isn't on top of it, and they need to be.
It does make a difference because usually I would say, hey, we don't need to release everything that they have, knowing that what they have. But I think there is you hit it on the head. There is a need for the American people to understand the world is about to dramatically change, and the United States is sitting around with its hands in its pockets.
Right. So maybe we shouldn't build more aircraft carriers, and maybe we should build the stuff that fights hypersonic missiles.
Yes.
Because that's what our enemies are shooting at us, okay?
Correct.
So that's one big thing. The third thing is stuff we already knew. Now, this is like, again, Glenn, we should have learned after like 5 years of like Russiagate that like the intelligence officials, when they're predicting the future, they don't really know what the hell they're talking about any more than you or me, right? But they have to do it. They have to file these analyst reports every day, and then one of them leaks to Congress like, oh my God, we figured out the future. But nobody knows the future, so we know that they're full of crap, right? So it's sort of like, okay, well, what do? They end up saying, the Ukraine war is grinding towards stalemate. Yeah, no, yeah.
I got it. I know where you're going.
China has enough missiles and planes to bury Taiwan under a pile of rubble before they can do it. That was today's story. Taiwan can't defend itself from China. Guess what? That's true. It's obvious. Everyone in China knows it. Everyone in Taiwan knows it. So the fact that it got leaked from a document by a bunch of analysts who are probably reading the paper doesn't really bother me. So that's the third. It's like
Correct.
Stuff that everybody knows.
And I think there is something that, I have no access to secret information, but I think it fits into this category. We have no real ability to fight a war with China, especially in Taiwan. We have no ability. We don't have the supply chain. They could overwhelm us with drones from China. Just knock us out of the sky with drones like crazy. We're not prepared. So all this talk about a buildup of war with China should be really concerning to the American people when you learn they have missiles like they have, hypersonic missiles, and we're not prepared just in a supply line for anything that happens in Taiwan. But nobody's talking about it.
Well, Glenn, I 100% agree with you because I was in Taiwan in November, and I went to the front lines of the defenses, and I found something that shocked me, that the front lines aren't really there, that it doesn't exist. The Taiwanese know that they can't defend from an invasion. And guess what? Our intelligence community knows that we can't defend from a Chinese invasion. And yeah, we're telling ourselves a story in Washington about some sort of fight over Taiwan that doesn't match the reality. Now, there's two things you could do about that. One is you could just admit it and say, okay, well, Taiwan, you guys are on your own. I guess we'll just give all of our semiconductors, to the Chinese and see how that goes. Or you could fix it. In other words, you could give them the stuff that they need to defend themselves and move our stuff closer to Taiwan to make our deterrence more credible. All right. Now, those are two legitimate arguments, but what we're doing is the worst of both worlds because we're pretending that we can defend Taiwan when we actually know that we can't.
And they know we can't. They know we can't.
We know it. They know. And the Chinese know it, right? So they're not deterred. And this is the problem that we made with Putin is we told ourselves that Putin was deterred, and he wasn't. And we know he wasn't because he invaded. So what are we going to wait until that happens again? Or are we going to learn that lesson and decide that if we care about these countries and if we're going to make a commitment to defend them, and again, you may say, okay, well, we shouldn't commit that if we can't back it up. Fine. All I'm saying is if we do commit it, then we should back it up.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. We can't bluff our way through and then fold. We have to back it up, but we're not preparing for any of that. And how far do these missiles fly? And they're hypersonic, which I've just heard last week or the week before that we now have one, but I don't know if I believe that. This is a hypersonic, which makes it almost impossible to take down, right?
Right. It's hypersonic, which means it flies faster than sound, but it's also a hypersonic glide, which means you can maneuver it. So when we shoot up the missile defense, all we have to do is maneuver around it. And we can also they can also maneuver it to hit our aircraft carriers, basically as far as Guam. Half the Pacific is now, no entry for our aircraft carriers if they decide to use these things. That's a huge problem for Taiwan, but not just for Taiwan, for the entire South China Sea. They're basically taking over Asia while we're sleeping, okay? And now I'm not saying that we should buy hypersonic missiles to fight hypersonic missiles. I'm saying that we should buy the things or build the things that defend against hypersonic missiles. And so it's complicated, and you have to think ahead of your opponent. But right now they're thinking ahead of us. And the scenario is that if China I heard you talk about the timeline, right? The timeline for me is they'll go when they're ready. Okay?
Yeah.
They're not ready. That's why I don't think they can go this year or next year. Sure, they'd rather do it on a Biden watch than on a Republican watch, but they're not ready yet. So if you think about it, they'll probably get ready in about 3 or 4 years. That's the best guess. And we don't know who's going to be president then, but that's our timeline to prepare.
Oh, that would be a dream come true if that's true. And my sources tell me that they don't have the landing vehicles to be able to do an invasion like that. They could clearly wipe everything out and defeat us, but they don't have all of the things they would need to really take that island. Is that
so, Glenn? Yes, that's right. But there's 3 things that the Chinese are doing. One is to prepare the invasion force, which will take 3 or 4 years. The second is to prepare economic resiliency. They saw the Putin sanctions and said, not for us. Why do you think they're going around the world changing all of their business agreements out of U.S. dollars?
Mm-hmm.
That's because when they attack, they don't want to be sanctioned. So they're actively trying to protect themselves from sanctions. That's number 2. Number 3 is they're building 1,000 new nuclear weapons. Why are they doing that? Why are they building 400 missile silos in the middle of China and then 1,000 nuclear warheads? There's only one reason. It's to threaten to attack us if we defend Taiwan. They're building a nuclear deterrent, an economic resilience, and an invasion force. And all those things coalesce around 2027. And we don't know who's going to be president here. We don't know who's going to be president in Taiwan, but we do know who's going to be president in China. That's the president for life, Xi Jinping. And he wants to do this, and he's going to do this one way or the other. In other words, he might not even attack. If he can get us to not care and get the Taiwanese to switch governments to a pro-China government, then he'll do it without attacking, and he'll just politically and economically. That's actually better for him, but he reserves the right to attack. So we have to prepare for that, but not only focus on the military part. We have to focus on the economic coercion, the political interference, the cyber warfare. This is how the autocrats wage war. It's not just guns and missiles and throwing recruits at the problem. They're waging a multi-front hybrid warfare, and we're not sophisticated enough to deal with that, but we need to be.
So, Josh, one more question on this China thing, and this is this is probably crazy, but if I were president, or somebody in the planning room, if there is one anymore, that it would be saying, okay, we got to do everything we can to get some very high tech, the best of the best chip factories here in America. We've got to do everything we can to attract so we can get that high-end chip making ability happening here in America as quickly as we can. And then, honestly, the only thing I would do if they, took Taiwan is, I hate to say this, but I would blow up those chip factories because that's really what they want.
Right. Okay. So Glenn, I can't lie to your audience. I have to be honest. I just can't help it. We just took our best chance to build the next generation of semiconductor factories in the United States, and we flushed it down the toilet. You've heard of this CHIPS bill. It was the first time Congress ever did anything in a bunch of years. And what they did is they spent $50 billion to subsidize the semiconductor industry to build not the latest chips, to build basically the second-tier chips, okay?
And we got enough of those. We can make those. We can make those.
I mean, we need those too, but
I know,
it doesn't really get at that problem. Now, I saw Tsai Ing-wen, the president of Taiwan, when she was in town, and they asked her, okay, well, you guys make the best chips. Can we make them here? And she said, listen, it's not possible because we spent 40 years setting up the supply line in the factories, and you can't just pick up all of that stuff and just move it across the world. It doesn't work that way. And we just tried to make this big investment, and we didn't do it. It was a big payoff to these industries, who, by the way, are taking separate money and going to build chip factories in China because they love to do business in China too. So it's kind of a taxpayer subsidy that's being funneled out of the country. But that's a separate issue. What I'm trying to say is, to answer your question directly, is that if China takes Taiwan with those chip factories, then they will control the world economy for the next, let's say, 20 years. Now, if they blow up the chip factories, then we're all screwed. Then forget about your next generation robotics, your cars, everything. But so that's not really a good solution. But yes, I do think that if the attack is coming, that will be the choice. And to be honest with you, it's up to the Taiwanese. And the Taiwanese I talked to would rather not blow up their economy, and they would actually rather be subjugated to Beijing than to have no economy at all. And that's again, a reality that we don't like to talk about in Washington because we like to tell ourselves everything's fine. Everything's not fine. The only real way to save our economy is to not starve our our businesses of the next generation technology is to prevent China from attacking Taiwan. And the only way to do that is by upping the deterrence. And that's why we have to be serious about defending Taiwan, not just about talking about it. That's my view. You may disagree. That's my view, okay? Because all the alternatives are disastrous. We don't want China in control of Taiwan. That's a disaster for our economy, for our core interests. And if we blow up the economy, well, that's kind of a nightmare scenario as well. So why don't we just do what we say we're doing, which is to be on Taiwan's side to defend them from getting attacked for no reason? Because
wait, I don't think I understand. Wait, you mean like let your yes be yes and your no be no?
Do what you say and say what you mean and mean what you say.
Wow,
That would be a revolution in American foreign policy. I haven't seen it 25 years. I don't know about you. But why don't we try it just for once?
I know, but the other is working so well, Josh. It's working so well. It's just crazy. Josh, thank you so much. I appreciate all your analysis and your hard work. Josh Rogin, the name of his book is Chaos Under Heaven, and it talks all about China and what we're really facing. Josh Rogin, you can follow him. He is a columnist for The Washington Post.